The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
Objective coverage. Hey, that's new.
If we get caught, we're going to jail.
The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app.
I'm going to need to see some identification.
Back to Dave Hooker.
Here we go, kids. Welcome on a Tuesday. What does that mean? That means John Adams each and every Tuesday. We look forward to him. Brought to you by Neubert Collision Center. We got a big show on tap. I know the College Football Playoff Selection Committee show, and it is a television show, is today. So we'll discuss that for a little bit. Also with John, were the Vols out-coached or out-talented at Georgia? I thought that Josh Heupel gave a little hint as to that. Is Nico Iamaleava too sensitive, and thoughts about Nico coming up and his play later on the program? I'm one to think that he's kind of arrived. I don't have a question mark going into a big game, even though the win wasn't there on Saturday. Why was Tennessee's defense dragging at the end? Jackson Moyle was the certainly most evident case of that, but there was more than that. Tennessee gave up the long drive in the fourth quarter that ultimately determined the game. Also, Ryan Callahan of 24/7 Sports will join us. We'll talk a little bit of recruiting and which two lost teams should be left out of the college football playoff. That'll be Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank. And I have a feeling that Lane Kiffin wants the LSU job. I know that Lane Kiffin wants the LSU job. Will he get it? Has he arrived as a great coach? We'll discuss that. So a lot going on. Caleb Calhoun, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing to start this lovely Tuesday, Dave?
I'm well. Look at you rocking the sport coat. I feel woefully underdressed.
I'm sorry. I've been rocking it for a while, but, as the grind of the season, went on, I feel like I work harder than the coaches do and had to roll up my sleeves a little bit. So I decided.
You do. At least you look the part of a smart guy more than a lot of the coaches.
But the coaches that look the smart guy are not always the smart guy, as you well know, Dave.
Yes, that is true. Always beware in hiring the handsome face. I've said that a million times, and it happens at the high school level a lot.
The coach, my red flag, before I know you want to get to Travis, and I agree with, my red flag is the coach that still, in this day and age, decides to wear a tie on the sideline. The coach that decides to wear a tie on the sideline.
Well, you can't do that in the NFL anymore.
No, but college, the coach that decides to dress up and wear the tie still, it's the 1980s or 70s, like how Joe Paterno did back in the day, or Johnny Majors did, but they still are deciding to do that when the dress code has changed. That coach never trust. I never trust that coach.
So you didn't. You shouldn't have trusted Joe Paterno. Did you trust Johnny Majors?
No, that's a different time. They came from a different era when you did that. I'm saying if a coach is hired, like Al Golden at Miami or PJ Fleck at Minnesota, if you're hired today and you're wearing a tie on the sideline or a sweater and a tie under it, I'm starting to think you're thinking more about your look than you are coaching ball. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I'll give you another example. How about Tom Landry? Tom Landry wore a coat and tie, but he was supposedly the most hardcore guy when it came to looking you in the face and saying you've got a place on this team and then cutting you 2 days later.
I could believe that. Tom Landry also sucked his last 10 years. So,
He had a guy named Danny White, no relation, that just couldn't get the job done. All right, we've got a lot going on in the program today. We're going to get joined by Ryan Callahan here shortly. If you can get that thumbs up button, we would greatly appreciate it. We want to bring as many people in as possible. We're going to talk to John Adams later in the program of the Knoxville News Sentinel. Yes, Landry always wore the fedora. He did. And now you can't even, not to get sidetracked, but you can't wear a coat and tie on the sideline now in the NFL. Do you think that's strange?
That is. Is it a branding thing? Why do you think they do that?
I think they want them to wear the clothes that they sell.
Well, why don't they sell their own suits and ties?
I'm open. Nobody wears suits and ties anymore. Okay, our poll question today is going to be, and then we're going to leave the Georgia game be after this one brief moment. We're going to talk some recruiting here in a second with Ryan Callahan. Tennessee was blank versus Georgia, and that's out-coached, out-talented, out-refereed. Caleb, how would you order those if you were to choose in our poll question, which I know you'll do?
I have to say they were out-talented first. And the reason I'd say out-talented was the biggest part of the game was getting pressure that Tennessee relies on is getting pressure up front, and the edge rushers didn't do it. I mean, sorry, but like, how can I sit there and say they were out? That's not scheme. That's not refereeing. They weren't winning their battles on the line of scrimmage defensively.
A lot of max protect, though, and a lot of max protect, staying in the game. I really thought that, I'm surprised you would say that. And we're going to get into it with John Adams, but I thought they were out-coached, clearly. I mean, to me, I thought that talent gap was actually closer, and Josh Heupel alluded to that, not on the edge pass rushers, but in his press conference yesterday, he said that Tennessee had closed the gap from, I guess, 2 years ago in terms of their outside skill position players on offense and defense, that guys got open.
Maybe you're right on the max protect, but if that's the case, then the linebackers got out talented for being totally out of position way too often, because there should have been that many people to cover in the back.
Well,
that's right.
That's our poll question now. Tennessee was blank against Georgia, out-coached, out-talented, out-refereed. I don't think any of those are words, for the record. And this guy that we're bringing in now could probably tell me, because he's a great writer. He's the recruiting rhino. He covers recruiting for Tennessee at 247. Ryan, is that recruiting rhino term taken off at all? Because I've tried to push it.
You know what? I don't know that it totally has, but, it probably could use some promotional help elsewhere. I could see that maybe having some potential if others can get behind it.
All right, buddy. We're going to push for that. I know a guy named John Pennington, so maybe if we can work it into his show, then it becomes a thing. We want to get into 4 downs. We want to ask you about 4 prospects that Tennessee is in on. But first, let me get, if you had to pick one, it's our poll question, and then we're going to kind of try to put the Georgia game to bed here in the next hour or so. But I do want to get your thoughts on it. Tennessee was blank against Georgia, out-coached, out-talented, out-refereed, if you had to pick one.
I would lean more toward out-talented. I think Tennessee obviously had opportunities to win that game, but at the end of the day, when you have more talent across the board, as Georgia does, I believe still, even though they've had some of that advantage in terms of stockpiling talent eroded a little bit by the transfer portal, NIL, things like that have kind of chipped away at it. I think they still have more talent across the board, and Oscar Delp, what he did, is a perfect example of that. You just have more opportunities to sort of exploit matchups that might favor you, and when you have talent across the board, you can sort of pick and choose where the opponents have weaknesses. And Georgia was more explosive offensively, and I think part of the reason for that was they just had better players. So that doesn't mean Tennessee couldn't have won the game if things had gone differently, but just more chances for a team like that to eventually pull it out, and they did play well enough to win, obviously, if you have more talent, and I think Georgia kind of showed that Saturday night.
That's interesting. Okay, I'm in the minority. Caleb Calhoun agrees with you. Let's go ahead and get to 4 downs right now. Ryan Callahan joining us with 247 Sports. He does a great job, my favorite in terms of covering recruiting. So we've got some prospects we want to ask you about. 4 downs brought to you by our good friend Medicare Misty. Here we go. 4 downs right now.
4 downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show.
4
Downs. A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Okay, as we get into this, Ryan, let me ask you first your thoughts on one game and the effect that it can or doesn't or does have on recruiting.
As far as just the Tennessee-Georgia game,
Just in general.
I think for the most part, it's not usually a big deal in recruiting. Most of the time when you have kids in for big visit weekends, and I kind of mention this all the time, I feel like people almost don't believe it because it doesn't seem logical to fans. But when you've got in past years when Tennessee would bring in huge visit lists for the Alabama game, and at that time fans knew Alabama was going to win by 3-4 touchdowns. I'm talking before the Josh Heupel era for the most part. When those games were happening, you still were impressing prospects because they come away talking about the atmosphere. A lot of those guys had never experienced games at Tennessee before, and that's what they're looking at. And so a single game, is it going to be a difference maker? Not necessarily. Now, a memorable experience. The guys who have been at Tennessee's wins over Alabama the last 2 times, they stormed the field in some cases. They were part of a memorable locker room celebration. Those kinds of things stick with you. But generally speaking, the result of a single game, not going to sway most guys. And for that matter, it doesn't change drastically the view of a program overall. I think that, there are some exceptions, like a win at Georgia could have sent a statement for Tennessee. So I would look at a game like that as maybe a missed opportunity, but not something that's necessarily going to hurt Tennessee. Because I think a lot of kids probably view Tennessee as a top tier SEC program, just not quite at Georgia's level yet. So it was a missed opportunity, but not one that's going to really hurt them.
It's kind of like chicks. I went on a college tour with my son, and we went to USC, UCLA, a bunch at Vanderbilt, and UMass. He ended up at UMass. And if he had picked just because of the girls there, that wouldn't have been a wise selection. Is that a fair comparison?
I think it is. And I don't think most recruits though get caught up in all of that. I think they, even when they are at a memorable win, some of them, do their best not to get swept up in all that. I talked with an offensive line target for Tennessee who was at one of the games last month, and he's like, it was the Alabama game actually, and he was like, I've got guys telling me to commit and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm loving this, but I can't get swept up in this. I'm not going to make a spur of the moment decision. Most kids kind of shrug that stuff off, and a single win or a single loss isn't going to sway them. They're looking at things like getting to the NFL now, NIL opportunities. Obviously, it's a much more big picture, business-like decision for a lot of these kids. So there are exceptions, of course. Everybody's different, but I think that's the way it is. Where a single win's not going to drastically change a whole lot, unless it's one of those wins that kind of catapults you to a different level as a program, like we've kind of seen with some of these, like the Tennessee Alabama wins the past couple times. Those were kind of perception changing wins for Tennessee because they put them on a kind of on a similar level with Alabama, and they previously hadn't been viewed that way.
Agreed. If you pick it on the ladies and a guy picks Georgia, I can't blame him. There's something about the black bands. Here we go. Cooper Mays, tell us what to do.
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and
subscribe. All right.
Coop here. First down.
Thanks, Coop. All right. What do we got? Caleb, prospect number 1 on board as we want to get Ryan Callahan's thoughts in Cruton.
Yeah, Ryan, good to see you, by the way. I wanted to talk about a few 2026 prospects because it seems like 2026 recruiting is much more in season now than 2025 recruiting. So I just want to throw out a few names, and I'll let you name anybody at the end. But first down, 5-star tight end Kendry Harrison. It sounds like Tennessee is a favorite to land him. Where is Tennessee standing with him right now?
They were once one of the top contenders for him. I think the momentum that Tennessee had in that one seems to have faded in recent months. The Vols have not gotten him on campus yet this season. He's now approaching a decision. So I think there are some other teams that have caught his eye, Oregon being one of them. If you remember, of course, Tennessee flipped Desan Brame away from Oregon. So Oregon missed out on some tight end targets in the 2025 class. Harrison, a guy they've really prioritized in the 2026 class. That seems to be one of the teams to watch most closely with him as he gets ready to announce his decision in less than 2 weeks now. So we'll see if anything changes there. But Tennessee seems to have lost a little bit of the traction that it had. He's been to Knoxville a few times, but hasn't been back lately. And that one not at the moment, not shaping up as well for Tennessee as I thought it might a few months ago.
All right. Second down. Here we go, Coop.
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Thank you. He brings the energy, Ryan. All right. Go ahead, Caleb.
All right. So what about 5-star wide receiver Tristan Keys? I didn't think Tennessee would have to go recruiting that heavily for wide receivers, but after what we've seen from the unit this year, seems like they need some help in the future. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's one Tennessee's done a great job with. He's been to Knoxville for a couple games, was at the I believe the Florida game, and then came back for the Kentucky game just a few weeks later. Really enjoyed both of those visits, and I think Tennessee is one of the top contenders there. I think LSU also very much in the picture. He's a guy that's talking about making a relatively early decision, so maybe sometime early next year we'll see if that holds. He didn't rule out waiting until the spring or something like that. And he's going to be a pretty coveted guy. He just recently moved up in our rankings and as you mentioned, now a 5-star on 24/7 Sports. So I think that's one to watch closely because there's going to be a lot of competition there. But Tennessee, I think, definitely one of the teams to beat right now and has done a really nice job with them. Definitely made a move with those 2 visits over the past several weeks.
All right, 3rd down, Coop.
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. 3rd down.
Caleb, what do you got?
All right, Ryan, moving to 3rd down. I feel like this guy's leaning more towards Georgia now, but I thought, and he was at the game, I think, this past weekend, but I still felt Tennessee was making a push for him. 2026 linebacker Tyler Atkinson, a 4-star.
Yeah, that's one it's a big time battle. Several teams in that one. He's been a recruit for a long time. If you follow recruiting, you've probably been hearing on our site and others about Tyler Atkinson for probably more than 2 years. He got offers at the end of, I believe, the summer after 7th grade or going into 8th grade, something like that, is when he started getting offers. So this guy's been on the radar for a long time. The interesting thing about him that maybe gives Tennessee a foot in the door here is he was born in Knoxville, lived there for just a couple years. So he's got that connection. He's been to Tennessee several times. Hasn't been there as much lately, though, as other schools have become more of a factor and as the recruiting process has gotten a little more serious and intense for him. So I think Georgia's done a really good job prioritizing him lately. I think the Bulldogs are probably one of the teams to beat. Tennessee definitely in that one, though. There's been some talk of getting him back on campus soon. We'll see when they can make that happen. But I think he's only been to Knoxville once this year, if I remember correctly, and definitely someone that they're battling for, but so are a lot of other teams. And probably still a long way to go in that one either way.
Okay, so you said he's been in recruiting news for a long time.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Ryan. Is he one of those guys that perhaps has gotten caught up in his own recruitment? And I've seen that before. You kind of enjoy the attention a little bit. There was a certain cornerback out of Brentwood Academy that's gone on to NFL fame that you probably – I mean, the first time I interviewed him, he's like, you want to interview me? And then 6 months later, it was like he was the prima donna. But is it one of those guys that you feel like's getting caught up in the whole recruitment of it, or is he just actually truly waiting his time?
No, I think he's still waiting his. I mean, he's a junior in high school, so some guys they're still taking their time. Some guys truly don't know, and you just now, the big element that gets changed going into your junior year is June 15th of this year is when coaches could actually start directly contacting class of 2026 prospects. So before then, you don't really get the phone contact. You don't get to see truly how badly some of these schools want you. So the last 4 or 5 months have probably been pretty insightful for him to start getting a feel for who's really making him a priority and who's not. So I don't think so. I think if anything, it can sometimes be the opposite, where a lot of those guys that get recruited early get tired of it and they're ready to be done with it by the time they get to the middle of their junior year. So we'll see how he approaches things. I could see that one going either way, but even if he committed early, I think that's one that wouldn't be shut down probably till closer to the end. He's going to continue to hear from other schools because he's a really good prospect, obviously.
All right, good stuff. If anybody has a prospect they want to ask about quickly and they want to put it on the message board, feel free. Caleb has one more.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. 4th down.
See, he gets more energetic as we go. All right, Caleb, what do you got?
Yeah, Ryan, I just want you to throw out a few names, a few other recruiting prospects that kind of slipped through the cracks when I was doing this, or that Tennessee should know about, or Tennessee fans should know about.
Just in the 2026 class or just
2025 too. 2025 too. Yeah.
Well, in the 2025 class, I'll definitely start with a guy who's scheduled to visit Tennessee this weekend, DeJuan Morris, the USC running back commitment out of Oakland High School in Murfreesboro. Been a big-time target for Tennessee for a while now. They looked for some other running back options earlier this year, kind of looking for a bigger back, and then sort of circled back to him after he committed to USC and have really made a strong push. Kind of took them a while to chip away at it, get him back on campus, and they finally got him back there for the Kentucky game earlier this month, now coming back for his official visit this weekend. That's an important visit with Tennessee looking to add a second back to this class, which I think takes on a lot more importance, especially given the season Dylan Sampson has had. There really might be an opportunity for a guy like DeJuan Morris to come in and maybe play early next year if he can be that type of guy. And I think he's got a somewhat similar skill set to Sampson. So that's a really important visit to watch. Certainly the other 2025 target to watch, Isaiah Campbell, 4-star defensive lineman, former Clemson commitment, coming off his official visit to North Carolina over the weekend. That one has gotten more interesting recently. I think North Carolina has made a bit of a move there. Tennessee's still very much in it, but the Tar Heels close to home, certainly a chance to be comfortable there at a school he's visited a lot of times, and he and his family, I think, are intrigued by that. So we'll see where that one goes. He's looking to maybe announce the final decision on early signing day. So still some things to watch in the 2025 class. That certainly stands out. And just a ton of names to watch in the 2026 class. Obviously, I always kind of start in-state. Tennessee's done a good job there, getting some early commitments in that class in-state. But still a lot of names left on the board there, and some guys that Tennessee's already prioritized. Caden Harris, the cornerback from West Tennessee, Zach Groves, edge rusher from the Nashville area. So a lot of guys in play, obviously this early. But I always kind of start with, can you build that foundation in-state, which frankly has been a bit of a challenge for Tennessee in the past couple classes. A few guys who've gotten away in-state, trying to change that trend in the 2026 class. I think they're off to a good start with some of those guys.
Hey, Ryan, may I ask an odd question? Because I haven't covered recruiting closely in a number of years, and especially since before NIL. But you used to always ask prospects about, what did you like about this school? What did you like about their facilities? What do you like about that stuff? And blah, blah, blah. And it went on and on and on. Do you ever just come out and ask a guy, what's the NIL package like? I mean, it would be rude for me to ask you, Ryan, what are you making nowadays? But it really is a factor in recruiting. Do you just come out and say, how do you compare the NIL packages, or how do you treat that?
Yeah, it really is interesting, because even though it's sort of the elephant in the room for everybody, it's almost this unspoken thing that no one's comfortable acknowledging. So recruits often, even if it comes up, there are some who will mention it and say they'll admit that's going to be a factor in their decision. Usually that's about as far as most recruits will take it, certainly in an interview setting. So it really is interesting how that's handled, even though everyone sort of knows it's out there. It's not a secret. It's just one of those things that no one wants to talk about, and certainly not in specifics. So we'll see if that changes over time, but there still is. Maybe it's just because of the years of it being, illegal. There's just this stigma attached to talking to money. At the end of the day, too, everyone's worried about leverage, right? If anybody has anyone advising them, you're probably advised not to talk specifics. Let teams bid against themselves if it comes to it. You don't want to mention, if you're negotiating for a salary at your job, some people might tell you, hey, don't even tell them a number. Let them throw out a number. So I think it's that kind of thing too with a lot of recruits.
Yeah, that's what Caleb did to me.
But what?
Ryan, we appreciate you, buddy. How do people follow your work?
Yeah, GoVols247.com, and tons going on this time of year with all the crossover in sports, recruiting, getting in the stretch run. It's weird to say we're a little more than 2 weeks away from early signing day, and the season's still going. So, tons going on and lots to follow at GoVols247.com.
I've said this before. I mean it wholeheartedly. Ryan is your must follow if you're into recruiting, and I certainly appreciate it, buddy.
Appreciate it, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ryan Callahan. He is the best, and I think some others out there I think reporters get caught up in the recruiting process at times. I don't think Ryan is one of those, which is why I follow his work very closely. 4 Downs brought to you by Medicare Misty.
19 years this year. I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
Caleb, I wonder, and we're not 18-year-old kids anymore, right?
Right.
But how much is Tennessee helped or hurt by being in the college football playoff? Because we'll find out the rankings this evening. I'm a believer that if you get in it and you get beat 49-7, it doesn't matter. Just as long as you're in the conversation, that PR, that publicity is just unbelievably good for your program. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Wait, so you're of the mindset if you get beat 49-7,
you just have to get in it. You just don't want to be in a bowl game.
Right. I agree. You'd rather be in the playoff. No one's going to say we want a bowl. You'd rather lose. Although, okay, this goes two ways. Yes, you'd rather be in the playoff, but Dave, you got to be careful. You don't want TCU under Sonny Dykes when they lost to Georgia 65 to whatever in the national title game, and everybody came away looking like, yeah, TCU had no business being in that title game. That game, we're going to talk about when people talk about SEC bias, which we'll talk about with the college football playoff soon enough. That game is the biggest reason that it exists. That plus the Florida-Ohio State game way back in the 2006 national title when everybody questioned if Florida belonged, and then Florida just beat the brakes off Ohio State when Ohio State was undefeated and Troy Smith won the Heisman. Those two games have that one led to SEC bias. That Georgia TCU game led to everybody saying, all right, there's a tier here, and Big 12 teams are on a lower tier than the other ones.
Okay, I have to agree with that, but they did win a semifinal game. So to me, that shows you belong. I mean,
it didn't help them though. I mean, that 65, everybody forgot the semifinal win because of how they looked in the national title. That was the storyline the whole offseason. That's why Florida State was left out last year, by the way. Yep, they did not want a repeat of TCU.
Okay, this day in Tennessee sports history is brought to you by our friends at Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Champions look good in orange, hdknoxville.com. What do you got, Caleb, for this day in Tennessee sports history?
On this day 8 years ago, Josh Heupel was Missouri's offensive coordinator. So it wasn't his fault what I'm about to say happened, but Josh Heupel and Barry Odom marched into Knoxville. And on Josh Dobbs' senior day, Tennessee beat Missouri 63-37. They had over 600 total yards of offense. Josh Dobbs accounted for 5 touchdowns and over 400 total yards of offense, rushing for 3, throwing for 2. It was a vintage Dobbs performance. It was a great send-off for him in Neyland Stadium for his career.
What do you think, Dobbs? Because I think based off our conversation, getting to know each other over the past year or so, I think you are a little higher on Dobbs than me. How good do you think Dobbs is or was for Tennessee? Where would you rank him on the hierarchy of top Tennessee quarterbacks?
Okay, we're going to go talent or production?
Both. I don't think he lacked in talent, do you?
I think he was more limited. I think he was athletic and he was accurate and he was a good decision maker, but he was held back because Josh Dobbs maybe had Rick Clausen's arm strength, honestly. And that hurt him a lot. But in terms of production, Dave, I mean, you got Peyton Manning. You got Hendon Hooker. Look, in terms of career production, there's a strong case for Josh Dobbs. It's the second best quarterback in Tennessee history. That 2016 season is the third best season. There are 3 seasons that are the standard for Tennessee football quarterback play. There's Peyton Manning's 1997 season, and Jimmy Hyams will disagree with me, but Dave, I don't know what I think that's the gold standard. That is the standard of playing quarterback in college football, Manning in 97.
I don't think Jimmy would disagree with you.
He breaks down Hendon Hooker's stats and shows how Hendon Hooker was better in 2022. But I'm more of, but that was a different era. Peyton Manning, if you factor in the era, Peyton Manning 1997 is the greatest individual season anybody has ever had in the history of Tennessee football. Everybody else falls short of that. But just behind that is Hendon Hooker in 2022 and Josh Dobbs in 2016. And I mean, those are right there for second and third.
We'll beat up on Jimmy tomorrow. The Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOK for 10% off. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Coming up, which two-loss team should be left out of the college football playoff? I've got your answer, and it's Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank. Give me 2 minutes. We'll be right back. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
I've been in business actually 19 years this year. I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
He tries very hard. The Dave Hooker Show.
All I know is when we win a game, it's a team win. When we lose a game, it's a team loss.
A presentation of Off the Hook Sports.
Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable!
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Look at Steven. Hendon is the sheriff now. Peyton is just the deputy. Wow.
No, Peyton has moved into
mayorship.
Yeah, he's gone more to the on the political side. He's just not. He doesn't have the he doesn't have it anymore. You know, he lost his aim.
Did you see where he's hosting the Country Music Awards?
I did.
If you would have told me that when he and I went to school at the exact same time, if you would have told me that guy was going to be hosting the Country Music Awards one day, I would have absolutely laughed out loud.
I mean, I would too. I will not be watching the Country Music Awards.
Me neither. I'm not a big country music fan. Just the fact that he's built this brand. And now, like, you could argue who's better in their playing days, Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. But let's all agree, Peyton Manning is crushing Tom Brady in post-career, right?
Oh, yeah, he is. He absolutely is. I totally agree with that. That's not even a question.
It's absolutely brutal.
I'm just saying it's going to be funny that half the winners at the Country Music Awards are going to be people who do songs about patriotism but played for the Live Golf Tour event. Oh yeah, so patriotic. Let me perform for the country that did 9/11. Okay.
Okay, we don't want to go politics too much.
I'm just saying, so patriotic, guys. You're going to perform for Saudi Arabia.
Okay, I didn't agree with Caleb on that. All right.
Just don't lecture me about any American flag stuff at the TMAs, guys. Don't lecture me about it. You guys all supported the Live Golf Tour. Don't say a damn word to me about patriotism.
I didn't support the Live Golf Tour. And my favorite golfer is Phil Mickelson, and he's not anymore. All right, but that's a whole different topic for another day. Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank. Which two-loss team should be left out of the college football playoff? Ultimately, let's say everything goes chalk. Is it Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, or Ole Miss? So these are SEC teams that we're talking about, just SEC teams. Which one of those should be left out of the college football playoff, Caleb?
Of those four teams, I don't do what the playoff committee does. I'm not a watch the games and use the eye test. I'm look at the resume. And if you look at the resume, it very clearly should be Ole Miss. Ole Miss should very obviously be left out of the college football playoff. They are playing. They are playing much better in November compared to other teams. So if you went by
like an eye test thing to me, or are you talking about the Georgia win?
No, I'm talking about that's what I'm saying. If you're going to go on the eye test, I think Ole Miss has a case over Tennessee. I don't believe in the eye test, though, because I think the eye test is way too subjective. Just way too subjective. And I've never liked the concept of the eye test. So because I don't like the concept of the eye test, I am a guy that says you got to look at the overall body of work. And the overall body of work says, yes, Ole Miss beat Georgia. I bow down. They beat the brakes off them. And that's impressive. They beat them in Mississippi. But they lost to Kentucky and they lost to LSU. And those are bad losses, guys. Those aren't just like, this isn't like, okay, LSU on the road is one thing. But if that's your better loss, if that's your best loss, when LSU is now 6-4, compared to Kentucky, who is, that's far and away the worst loss of any two-loss team that we're talking about, Dave. And Ole Miss has only played one premier team. Alabama's had to play Georgia and Tennessee. Georgia's had to play Tennessee and Alabama and Ole Miss and Clemson, by the way. Tennessee's had to play Georgia and Alabama. Ole Miss has had to play Georgia. That's it. They should. So honestly, they have two losses. The other schools all have two losses, and they've all played at least two games against college football playoff contenders. Ole Miss has two losses and has played one game against a college football playoff contender. I think this is very simple, actually. I think it's obviously Ole Miss.
Okay, I love it when you feel strongly about something and I feel strongly about something because I think you're dead wrong. And we'll get that on the poll question. Which team should be left out of the college football playoff? Which SEC team? Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia. Right now, Ole Miss with 77% of the vote. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's Alabama. Bank on it. Brought to you by Commercial Bank, member FDIC.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank. Life made better.
All right, we didn't get this as part of our poll question. We probably should have. What is Texas's biggest win this season?
I mean, I was going to get to Texas, by the way, because I wanted to play this game. But let's debate your Alabama topic first, and because you said Alabama, okay. I need you to make the case for Alabama, and then we'll get to Texas.
Okay, Alabama did beat a Georgia team that I think is pretty good, but Alabama got beat by Tennessee. So if I had to weigh the two teams in a vacuum, I would take Tennessee over Alabama. I am more of an eye test guy than you. So I will tell you that. But I'm also not one like the college basketball tournament that says you get hot at the end. So that's not a saving grace for Alabama for me, Caleb. That, they're better at the end of the year, but I'm eye test first, and then I'll fall back on resume. How they finish the season is probably the last factor in my mind. So unless Texas beats Texas A&M, and this would be a moot point, as they say in PAL, if Texas beats Texas A&M, then that's fine. They've got a worthy resume. Other than that, I mean, Georgia, yes, they beat Georgia, but
let me ask you this: with Alabama, why should but you could say that with Tennessee. Why should then Alabama go? Because you're saying Tennessee beat Alabama. I test call it a day. But then why should Georgia go over Alabama? They both have two losses, and Alabama beat Georgia. You have to throw head to head out the window, Dave.
I know. I am ultimately doing eye test. Let me ask you.
Honestly, do you honestly think? And I know Tennessee beat Alabama, but if you're going by eye test down the year, do you honestly think Tennessee's looked better than Alabama this year? I mean, a Tennessee team that Kentucky was putting up a fight with them into the fourth quarter?
I think it's negligible. I think it's pretty close. I think the problem is, and I want to get into this more when we have more time, is that ultimately nobody plays anybody, right?
No, I mean, I'm going to write out and I'm saving this for the end of the year, guys, but I'll tease it. I talked to Dave this morning, but the college football season has been objectively worse this year. And it's not, I actually won't blame the 12-team playoff, Dave. Even though I've been anti that, I'm blaming mega conferences. Mega conferences have destroyed everything we love about college football. And they've been an unmitigated disaster, honestly. So congratulations, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti. You really did a great job screwing up the leagues.
I'm curious on our message board. Would you rather your team play a tough non-conference schedule and go 10-2 than go 12-0 and play the likes of Kent State, play the likes of, throw out there whoever you want. It's not just Tennessee. I mean, if you look at who Texas has played, it's practically nobody.
Well, let's get to Texas.
Yeah, you look at all non-conference schedules. What would you rather your team do?
Well, here's where I would rather go 12-0 and play patsies at this point, because I know being in the SEC, the college football playoff is just going to ignore that. Although, well, I don't know yet. Here's why I don't know. I want to see what the college football playoff does with Indiana, because they're in one of the premier conferences. I have to see what they do with Indiana. Let's break down Texas, because here's where this could get really confusing, Dave. And are you ready? Are you ready for utter chaos and disaster to strike? And it could really strike Tennessee.
I'm like the Joker, let it burn.
Okay. Texas could very well lose to Texas A&M in 2 weeks. You and I both agree on that, right?
Yes.
I did not mention Texas A&M or Texas in the 2-loss teams in this list. And the reason is Texas has 1 loss. This is assuming they're already in. Texas A&M has 2 losses. This is assuming they lose to Texas, so they'll get 3. If Texas A&M beats Texas, you have a cluster of 6 2-loss regular season SEC teams. And there are, at that point, 4 spots available for 6 teams. Then it becomes which 2 should get left out. I think clear as day, Dave, and I think you're right. I don't even think it's a question Texas should be left out. I think they are 100% out if they lose to Texas A&M. They have not beaten. Their best win is Vanderbilt.
Okay. So do we want to get into the politics of why they want Texas to be in this thing?
Oh, they're going to put Texas in.
Did you see that stupid fight that was in the middle of Texas on Friday? I mean, there's a lot of money to be had in Texas.
Why do you think Greg Sankey gave Texas the easiest possible schedule their first year in the SEC? You think that was by
think he gave them SEC media days?
Yes. No, you're right. It made no sense to put it there, honestly, looking back.
Old Rear had a drive down there. I wasn't real happy about that. And there were a lot of people I talked to that didn't even, media outlets that didn't send people because they didn't think it was worth it. And I had one SEC official, I'm not going to say who it was, but I had one SEC official. I just said, how did things go in Dallas? And he said, it doesn't matter because ultimately everybody just sells sponsorships for this and they make more money. So they'll just charge more and we'll charge more. And that's how far they've been over backwards to have it in Dallas. So I think there'll be some blowback from that. I think it's going to be Atlanta or Nashville or perhaps Birmingham one day again. But no, you're right. They set the table for Texas. There's no question about it.
Yeah, no, they did. They and by the way, if Greg Sankey set the schedule for Texas to have an easy schedule, you don't think he has an ear in the college football playoff committee, and they're going to set the schedule for Texas to automatically get in if they can? There is guys, I'll just say it to you. There's a rig job in favor of Texas. More than any other team in college football this year, there is a rig job in favor of Texas. And it's so clear as day. Because if Texas loses to Texas A&M next week, and they still put Texas in, that will prove it. That would be a disastrous decision. I will also throw in this. Here's what I would do. If those 6 teams are all 10-2, I'm kicking out Texas and Ole Miss. Those are the 2 clear-cut teams that should be knocked out. The other 4 should be in. Some people may make the case against Texas A&M. You want to know the problem? You want to know one issue, Dave, that could arise if you put Texas A&M in the playoff?
Lay it on me.
Most people think that if Notre Dame loses another game, they're out. Army or USC. Say they lose, they're 10-2. Okay, they're out. But if Texas A&M beats Texas, and you put Texas A&M in the playoff, well, Texas A&M is 10-2. Notre Dame is 10-2. Texas A&M lost their opener to Notre Dame at home. You can't really justify putting Texas A&M in and not Notre Dame in at that point. This is a disaster waiting to happen. I think, though, I think both should be in over Texas. And look, I'll just say this. I'll just tell you this right now. BYU, if you look at the resumes of BYU and Texas, I'd put BYU in over Texas right now.
Okay, I got that. I don't have a problem with BYU whatsoever. It does seem like maybe, Caleb, is it more that they're not great or they're playing consistent competition out west? Because it feels like those games are more competitive.
I've always felt, I mean, they are. I think it's more just about the mediocrity of the teams. And if you gave me eye test, I would say Texas is better than BYU. I mean, on a neutral field, I actually think Texas would win 40-0. But I don't even think but the resume, I think BYU's resume is clear cut better.
I have an argument with that. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Here we go.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Got tagged him on Twitter, so he might be watching. I don't know what time they practice at Ole Miss. But what would you think about the possibility that Lane Kiffin would get the LSU job? Because right now, I think we all had him kind of pegged to go to Florida, correct?
Correct.
But do you want to go to Florida if you're Lane Kiffin? Their lack of administration, their lack of leadership, I don't know that Florida's a better job than Ole Miss right now. Right now. It might be in 5 years because of the recruiting advantage. But you talk about a recruiting advantage, you've got that at LSU. And if Lane Kiffin goes to LSU, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, he's going to win a national championship. That's a fact. So should other coaches be afraid of Lane Kiffin getting the LSU job? And I can also tell you this from multiple sources. Before they hired Brian Kelly, he reached out for that job, or at least his agent did. And he also had a plan to keep Ed Orgeron around, which might have undermined him, to be honest with you. But he wanted that job. I think he wants Florida, but I don't know that he wants Florida, Caleb. So should SEC coaches be afraid of Lane Kiffin potentially getting the LSU job? I say absolutely yes, because he's going to have better recruiting from the high school level. Okay. And then he supplements that with now he's learned how to manage the NIL, which everybody's had to do. I think Josh Heupel's ahead of the curve. A lot of coaches have had to catch up, but he's done that. So he supplements that with the quarterback that he absolutely wants, and he's got a high talent level to go along with that. He'll win a national title if he's there. He'll win 2 if he's there for 10 years.
Oh, I agree. 1 billion%. And the SEC should be scared of this. And you're right with the Florida administrative issues. I feel like I'm in the twilight zone thinking that talking about LSU being a better run program than Florida. I mean, Dave, throughout your time covering the SEC, wasn't LSU the most incompetently run administration who stumbled their way to 3 national titles? Because as we talked about before, you don't even need brain cells to win it there. So it's hilarious.
They were both equally as bad in the 80s. Right. And they were both referred to as sleeping giant programs on multiple occasions. But no, I mean, what's the most successful program? Alabama now with the national championships. But before that, Oklahoma has 5? Nebraska has several.
Maybe say Notre Dame, just historically Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, LSU should have been in that category. Florida should have been in that category, but they were historically bad before the 90s for the most part. LSU end of the 90s was still bad.
Yeah, exactly. So now when we debate the easier jobs, everything in a vacuum, I would say, I've always said LSU is the easier job. I would say in the NIL age, Florida could be the easier job. The only reason I say that is Florida has a chance. The only reason LSU was ever an easier job than Florida was because if you're Florida, Dave, you have to compete with Florida State and Miami for recruits, right? That was always the tough part. Well, if Florida's in the SEC and Miami and Florida State are stuck in this bad ACC contract, if Florida got their administrative problems together, yes. If they got it together, you do realize that Florida would be the premier program across the whole state of Florida. I mean, do you realize what that is? Do you realize what it is to be the premier program in the state of Florida? They could literally build the deepest, most talented teams year in and year out in college football history at that point. And
but I would take the LSU job over the Florida job.
I would too, because of the fact that LSU's better run at this point. But that's the only reason. But if you throw out competent administrations, I actually think Florida right now should be the better job. But I agree. I take the LSU job. In LSU, you don't have to go far to recruit to get kids. You know that. You're the one who told me they look for reasons to stay in Louisiana. They don't want to leave Louisiana. And Louisiana kids are unnaturally more athletic than the rest of the country, guys, when you look at them in the NFL. And
so administration aside, which job would you take? The show represented by Banks and Jones. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. If administration wasn't a problem, would you take the LSU job over the Florida job or vice versa?
I would take the Florida job nowadays. If it was pre-conference realignment, I would have taken the LSU job. But Dave, again, the way you determine these jobs is how much talent is in your recruiting pipeline area compared to how much competition you have for that talent. So we always agreed that Florida has more talent in their recruiting pipeline area. They just had to compete with Miami and Florida State and now UCF. Do they really have to compete with any of those schools right now if their administration is right? Would you rather have your pick of the litter of Florida kids or your pick of the litter of Louisiana kids? Even though Louisiana kids, there's a lot of talent, but there's more in Florida. It's just a bigger state.
To answer your question, I would rather have my pick of the litter of Florida kids, but I think I'm going to have easier recruiting success at LSU. I think the guys want to stay there. So your pick of the litter comment is very apt, but I would take the guys that ultimately I think want to be there, because listen, if you have more hours in the day and you don't have to recruit against Miami and Florida State and now Central Florida, as you mentioned, and maybe even a little South Florida with Alex Golish down there, but if you don't have to recruit against those teams, you got more hours in the day to invest in the guys that you really, really want. So I think what Lane Kiffin would do is he would build his recruiting base off, obviously, Louisiana talent. And then I think he'd cherry pick with NIL. I think he'd find the quarterback that he wanted that was out in California that perhaps he had to spend too much money or too much time on. You know, let's face it, Tennessee went all in on a lot of recruiting hours and dollars with Nico Iamaleava. And we could argue now, and we'll discuss this with John Adams a little bit later, if some of those efforts could have been better spent in other recruiting areas. I don't think so, but we'll get to that. Caleb, I just think that you've got a natural, you're going to have a B to B plus roster at LSU almost to a default.
Yeah, but see, I think that's the case with Florida now too. And I'm going to tell you something crazy. I think you talk about Florida's more national. Do you not think there are enough kids in Florida, though, that want to stay in Florida? I think there are.
I just know, talking to recruiters, coaches over the years, that they would rather dive into Florida and try to battle than in Louisiana. They felt like that was just a lost cause.
Here's the thing, though. What about the Miami area? See, here's what we're talking about here. Miami is stuck in the ACC. You don't think Florida could get the Miami area pipeline that built the Hurricanes into a dynasty in the 80s and 90s? That could be Florida now, plus the rest of the state of Florida. And by the way, you don't think Lane Kiffin can recruit Miami? I mean,
man, he had Nukes Richardson, still the only player that I've seen straddle a punt, and he did it twice. Straddle a punt return. It's the only guy I've ever seen do that.
I'm just saying, like, I agree with what you guys are. Guys, I'm the one who Travis calls me Calhoun with an X because I talked about how LSU is the easiest job in America overall, and it is, because Louisiana kids, not only do they want to stay in Louisiana, and not only is LSU the only Division I school, but also you can track this in the NFL. Louisiana kids are constantly undervalued on the recruiting trail. They actually are. I mean, if you look at the population of the state, even being in the Deep South, they should probably be like 9 or 10. They should be like Mississippi in terms of players put in the NFL. And somehow they're in the top 5 on the level of Florida and Texas. So I get it, guys. You aren't like, I know how good those kids are in Louisiana. But I do think Florida is such a bigger state population-wise, and there is no more competition in Florida for Florida kids, because Florida State, Miami, and UCF are effectively Division II schools now. They're effectively Group of 5 schools. So you're not getting competition from them. Florida State and Miami compete with Florida as much as Tulane and Louisiana Tech compete with LSU at this point in Louisiana. Okay? in terms of recruiting because they are not in the SEC. That SEC brand, when you're stuck in the ACC, is going to screw them. So I think Florida, just based on raw numbers, does have a better chance to land more talent. And then if you're Lane Kiffin, I mean, come on. I mean, when you're talking about girls, when you're talking about 20-year-old girls you want to take home, I mean, Florida or Louisiana.
Great. Well, I hope Lane's watching. Lane, I didn't tell him to say that, of course. Stat of the day coming up, brought to you by Dynasty Pools and Spas. For Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas. Caleb, stat of the day, what do you got?
Before we dive in, guys, y'all don't have to lecture me on Dylan Sampson. I get it. I'm the Louisiana cheerleader of Louisiana football talent. I think they are per capita the best football state in the country by far. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you.
Yes.
You got a wild there.
So people are just calling me out people need to explain to me about Louisiana. David, I know, and John knows too. Okay, so getting back to it.
Those on the message board, we love you, but
they're like, that is total bullshit.
All right, stat of the day.
Another Louisiana kid, Peyton Manning. There you go.
Yeah, he was pretty good. Stat of the day.
I mean, his roots aren't Louisiana, but yeah. Okay, so stat of the day is this is the 5th time since the end of the 1998 season, just the 5th time that Tennessee entered the second to last week of the regular season in the top 10 of the AP poll.
Just the 10th time overall?
No, the fifth time since the 98 season that they entered the second to last week of the regular season in the top 10.
Gosh, when you take out that decade of dumb bleeping, I mean, that's pretty good.
Is it?
But it's
not a decade. It's not a decade, Dave. It's 2 decades.
Right, but if I took out those, if you looked at just what Fulmer did, if you looked at what Josh Heupel's done, and you took out the trio of morons that they hired,
you have to go to the end of the Fulmer tenure too, though. Fulmer's last year, entering November in the top 10 was 2003. So 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, he was never in the top 10. That's 5 years. I mean, from 2003 to 2022, it never happened. The 5 years they were in the top 10, entering the second to last week of the regular season after 98, are this year, 2022, 2003, 2001, and 99. So, like, Dave, it's really skewed to just the post-98 recruiting success. Once that dried up, it's just 2022 and 2024.
Okay, what about this stat of the day? It's National Monopoly Day. What percentage of people do you think have never read the rules of Monopoly?
Oh, I'm going to say 65%.
Oh, red hot, 68%. Peak IV Hydration, South Knoxville and Sevierville. Live life to the fullest. Hydrate, rejuvenate, and elevate your health with Peak IV Hydration, peakivhydration.com. In 2 minutes, John Adams, brought to you by Neubert Collision Center, will join us. We're going to dive into, I think, 3 pretty darn hot topics. And one that I know Caleb and I disagree on because we went over to our 3:45 a.m. production meeting where the Vols out-coached or out-talented at Georgia. Is Nico Iamaleava too sensitive? And why were the Vols dragging on defense at the end? All with John Adams, brought to you by Neubert Collision Center. Give me 2 minutes. This is a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Stay tuned.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical, now in Powell.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7 East Tennessee locations.
When the lights turn on and the game begins, you need a team that gets the job done. It's Ford commercial truck season at Varner Ford in Clinton, where our strong lineup is built for power and performance. Step up your game in this new 24 F-150 4x4 Super Crew, $46,997. It's at 250 Cargo Van, $50,950. 24 Ford Maverick XLT Hybrid, $28,929.
Local you trust, performance you can afford. Varner Ford, built for the game.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
Who's this guy?
Hello, wizard.
The Dave Hooker Show,
Who?
a presentation of Off the Hook Sports,
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
All right, let's bring in John Adams here of the Knoxville News Sentinel. You might call him John Adams. I like to refer to him as Johnny One. John, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Dave. Thanks for asking.
It is National Monopoly Day. Are you a fan?
I played Monopoly when I was a kid. I kind of moved past that. Yeah, we used to play on Saturday. It was kind of a neighborhood game, Saturday night. It's about 12 years old. It was Ben Dart and I versus Bobby McConnell and Dickie Barnett. I had a game at home, and so did Ben. We always brought cash from our home game, so we were cheating. Unfortunately, Bobby and Dickie were too, so it kind of evened out. Yeah.
All right. So what did you guys do when the Civil War broke out?
You ask. I think we've gone down this road far enough. Let's move
on. Here we go. Excuse me. You got me choked up. All right. John, just simply put, were the Vols out-coached or out-talented at Georgia? Because Caleb and I strongly disagree on this, which is not for show. It's the truth. So I want to get your take.
Oh, Tennessee was extremely out-coached. I thought Todd Monken had come back to Georgia as the offensive coordinator and play caller. But no, it was Mike Bobo, who's never got much credit for anything at Georgia. But he ran a coaching clinic against Tim Banks in that defense. It was ridiculous.
Caleb, I agree with John on that. It's going to put you in the minority, but you think Tennessee was still out-talented? I
understand what you guys are saying. And just to get this out here, John, I do think Mike Bobo won the matchup with Tim Banks. Mike Bobo, I kept texting my a couple friends of mine. I'm like, guys, just wait. Mike Bobo will do something to cost Georgia this game. He always does. He always makes a dumb mistake at some point. And
he almost did on the shovel pass, just by the way.
Oh, he did. That's true. But the mistake really never came. I think what threw Tennessee off was, if you notice, they had one of the reasons they didn't bring pressure was they had actually prepared for those quick screens and time routes that Mike Bobo loves to call. So if you ever notice Tennessee on blitzes where they had some moments on blitzes to get pressure, they backed off when Carson Beck would turn his head because they were clearly coached that week to anticipate a quick screen or a time no-look pass, and those never came. But I still have to say out-talented, and the reason I have to say out-talented is I don't think the edge rushers got the pressure they were supposed to get, won their battles on the outside, and I think the linebackers largely just didn't. They were nowhere to be found. Those two things happened. And then the receivers got no separation from the cornerbacks on the offensive side. I can't really pin it on, I can't pin those things on coaching. I have to say that was a talent thing.
Okay. John, I want to get your take on all that, but I do want to clarify that Josh Heupel said that he felt like on the outside that Tennessee won some of those battles in his press conference yesterday. And he felt like that was the difference between perhaps a couple of years ago, but John, go ahead and roll with that.
Yeah. No, I mean, coaching is all about adjusting. Tennessee didn't adjust. Its linebackers were lost. I think Georgia threw a lot of motion at it, moved guys around, all the eye canning we hear about. And I think that confused Tennessee's linebacking core. Probably would have been a game where Keenan Peely was missed. He's out for the year with injury. But I think it was about adjusting. I can only, and I'm sure Tennessee blitzed a few more times than this, but I only remember one time Tennessee blitzing. I was baffled by what Tim Banks thought he was doing out there, why he was just letting the same thing happen over and over. Take a chance. By taking this approach, Tennessee allowed Carson Beck, a quarterback who has clearly been rattled by pressure. See the Ole Miss game, for example. And let him get in a comfort zone. And once he did that, he looked as good as he did against Alabama in the second half when it didn't apply pressure. And he led that comeback that almost won the game. You let a slumping quarterback, 12 interceptions, two fumbles in his previous 6 games. You let the guy get in rhythm, and he looked like the quarterback of last year. He looked like the quarterback he was supposed to be, a first-round draft pick, and just picked Tennessee apart. And Georgia doesn't have – you talk about talent. Georgia's receiving core is very average on its best day, yet it consistently beat Tennessee. I thought it was awful coaching in that game.
John, here's the other aspect of Tennessee's coaching that I think is troubling if you're a Tennessee fan. They've gone into a half against elite teams a couple of different times with either an even sort of game or the advantage. And I don't think, and I'm talking about against Alabama last year and against Georgia this year, I think they're too often comfortable standing pat at halftime. And halftime is when you should make the most adjustments. I feel like there are times that they think, oh, everything's going well, let's roll. And they don't make adjustments when things are going well.
Well, that second half reminded me a little bit of the 2020 game in Athens. Tennessee had won it. This is in the Jeremy Pruitt era. The last year of Jeremy Pruitt.
It's like an insult to era. It's like an insult to era to refer to era and Jeremy Pruitt at the same time.
Yeah, well,
insult to the word era.
Yeah, it's appropriately spelled ERROR, not ERA. Yeah, Tennessee had to lead it. It won its first 2 games and had to lead at halftime. A lot of people forget that. And then Georgia outscored it like 27-0 in the second half, and it was just another blowout. The second. And this is getting to another. There were just so many things wrong with Tennessee's defense in that game, and we'll get to another one about that how fatigued Tennessee looked in the fourth quarter. We can do that later. But yeah, I just thought it was one of the worst games of the Heupel era, given what was at stake and given the competition. This game was so winnable for Tennessee, and it just blew it.
So, John, I mean, in many ways, I agree. I don't know. Look, I'm not here to defend the coaching. If I were Tim Banks, I would have called many more stunts. I don't know why they just tried to win the battles outright when Georgia was doing 12 personnel. I would have sent some more blitzes. I didn't get it because did you guys notice that Tennessee didn't blitz a lot, yet its corners were out on islands most of the time covering the receivers? And I'm like, how do those two things happen at the same time?
I noticed that too. It's almost like they thought that Brock Bowers was still out there, John.
Yeah, but the tight end was open all the time. Brock, it was almost like saying, "Oh, Brock Bowers is gone. They don't have a tight end as an eligible receiver. Leave that guy alone. Don't even bother getting near him."
I think they were.
Go ahead, Ken.
No, you go ahead, John. You go ahead.
Okay. Well, you make a good point, and I noticed that early on. The announcers even commented on it. Boy, they're leaving those cornerbacks out there on an island, okay, one-on-one, which isn't a bad idea against Georgia's receivers. But you think with that, then that frees guys up. I mean, throw in a safety blitz every now and then. It was almost, it almost seemed like Tennessee was playing shorthanded back there, maybe 10 men. Maybe they should check the video to see if everybody was on the field.
Well, it's average. So with Chuck Smith, they had like 18. So at the end of 20 years, it all averages out the same.
Well, so I'm with you guys on. Look, I understand a lot of this. I just went a little bit more with talent because I think one of the things Tim Banks, no pun intended, banked on was his defensive line, which had been dominating all year, being able to get pressure without blitzing. And I think he particularly. And John, Georgia's been wrecked on the offensive line this year. I mean, I think Tate Ratledge was back, but Tate Ratledge has been playing either not playing or playing with one hand tied behind his back all year because he's been so hurt. And he played superb in this game. And I think it's kind of you dance with who brung you. Don't you expect Tennessee's defensive line to do and we're going to get to it if you're Tim Banks, weren't you preparing for your defensive line that has not let you down all year to do a lot better than they did in this game?
Certainly. I expected Tennessee to pick up where Ole Miss previous week. I mean, Ole Miss blitzed more than Tennessee did, quite a bit more, in fact. But its front four is really salty, and it severely beat up Georgia's offensive front. It seems like Tate Rutledge has been hurt for 3 years. He manages to play through a lot of stuff, and he did play well. Georgia's whole line played well. Probably the best game it's had all year. But here's the thing. Yeah, you can go into the game with that idea. Our defensive front can beat their offensive line. That makes sense. But when it's not happening, don't keep doing it over and over and just go down with a sinking ship. Again, that game was so winnable, and Tennessee's coaching just didn't try to win it. It's right there.
Yeah, you talk about adjustments. The adjustment I would have made at halftime would have been more blitzing. And that's, you go out there and you kind of play a stalemate, or you do play a stalemate in the first half. Then it's time to change them up and throw gas on the fire, in my opinion. But we've discussed the defensive side of it. My question is, John, does Tennessee have an offensive coordinator problem? And that's our poll question. You can take part. It is right now running away with yes, Joey Halsey was a soft hire. No, it's Heupel's offense. John, I want to get your take. John's appearance brought to you by Neubert Collision Center.
5th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that. If we wouldn't put our family in it, we're not going to put their family in it. If you're going to say that you're doing the best work in Knoxville, now saying it's one thing, producing it and providing it's another.
The largest family-owned collision center in Knoxville is Joe Neubert Collision Center.
John, we've seen it work out before with Kelsey Pope. They elevated him, internal promotion. But I questioned the Joey Halsley hire at the time because I felt like, from all that I've been told, that Alex Golesh is kind of a savant when it comes to offense. And more so, I just think that you needed one more bright person in the room. And you didn't go outside of your own doors and get them. Does Tennessee have an OC problem?
That's really hard for me to discern because you go back, how much of this is Heupel and how much of it's his offense coordinator? I mean, this is Josh Heupel's offense. So I give him the credit when that offense is working. I tend to blame him when the offense isn't. This is his offense. If he's got a problem with his offensive coordinator, maybe he should be able to fix it internally. I mean, take more of an active role in it. And I don't know exactly how that works, but it's his offense. He's the guy that came here with the big offensive reputation. So I have a hard time blaming the OC. But when you look at it, how bad has Tennessee's offense been? I mean, there's so much blame to go around. But you go back to 2022, Tennessee had Hendon Hooker at quarterback and Jalen Hyde at wide receiver. It doesn't have that combo anymore. It doesn't have a receiver that can stretch the field. It's I pretty much decided that Tennessee's receiving core was mediocre. It's below mediocrity. It's subpar. So it misses those guys, but I still have a hard time blaming the offensive coordinator. You may be exactly right on that, but I always, since it's Heupel's offense, I would think, well, if things aren't going as well as they should, he takes more of a hands-on approach. Would be common sense to me how he would go about it. How bad this offense is, in 2020, when Tennessee had to play an all-SEC schedule, 10 SEC games, Jeremy Pruitt, who's never been mentioned with the word savant in the same sentence, let alone offensive, Jeremy Pruitt's offense team averaged a little over 23 points a game in 10 SEC games. I'm sorry, 21 points, a little over 21 points. Tennessee's now in SEC games is averaging a little over 23. That's a stunning stat to me.
That's a crazy stat.
Yeah, that is stunning. And Caleb, I think it's oftentimes a group affair when you put together a game plan. But John's right. If Josh Heupel is the offensive mind that we all thought he was in 2022, he should step in the meeting room and say, hey, I got this. I feel like, do you guys remember when Auburn was going back and forth and it felt like every year Gus Malzahn was either taking more or less of the play calling duties? It just, I hope Tennessee, John, doesn't go down that path.
No, it was an ongoing drama. You couldn't keep up. So you're saying, and maybe that was by design. Gus just said, I'll fix it where none of us get blamed because they won't know who's doing the work. I
honestly wondered that. After 4 years of I'm taking more control of the offense than no, I'm handing it off, I wondered if it was just a way to deflect blame.
John,
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, it was comical.
John, I want to get your quick thoughts on this. We talked to Jacob Ward yesterday, and one of the things he said is that the offense is getting spread out more because so many assistants from Josh Heupel's offense are going places. You have Alex Golesh at South Florida, Jeff Levy at Mississippi State. Lincoln Riley actually runs a similar offense now at USC. And if you look at it, every coach I just named, including Josh Heupel, their offenses are struggling right now. So the question becomes, is it spreading out so much that it's getting more figured out? And how do they adjust if that's happening?
Well, that's a possibility, but we've seen this. I mean, this offense predates Josh Heupel. He didn't invent it. And so it's possible that you're seeing more of it. It's also possible that Tennessee, with the success it had in 2022, that defensive coaches around the SEC said, hey, we need to figure this offense out. And it's almost now, when we look back at it, the success in 22, when Tennessee averages seemed like 46 points a game. It led the nation in scoring and points per game. That teams sort of circled, opposing teams circled Tennessee and said, we got to do something about this offense. But when you take something away, you give up something. I mean, that's just how it works, defense versus offense. So to me, that makes you wonder, is Josh Heupel kind of just, well, if this system works, we look really good. But if the system doesn't work, man, I don't really have a plan B. But I don't think you can ignore the talent. And I think maybe I overrated the system when Hendon Hooker was here and didn't give Hendon Hooker enough credit. Maybe I didn't give Jalen Hyde enough credit because this was kind of all new to us. We'd been watching the Jeremy Pruitt offense. We'd been watching Butch Jones offense. And if anybody could say, yeah, that offense was known for this and coming up with anything other than a lot of laughter. It had no identity. And then Heupel comes in, and right from the get-go, when he averaged a little over 39 points a game in that first season, I mean, I just thought it looked like, well, he just plug in anybody and this thing's going to work. That's an unrealistic concept, I guess, but that's kind of what I was thinking after watching that for 2 years. Now, reviewing it, I kind of look at it as, well, so much of that had to do with the receivers and Hendon Hooker. And they don't have that kind of talent right now at those positions. I think Nico has plenty of talent, but right now it's not happening.
Okay, well, I want to ask you about that. Does that mean that Josh Heupel is the Ed Orgeron of coaches, another Ed Orgeron? Did he get the high water mark just because of talent? Pull up work trucks because they're all about trucks.
That is such a horrible thing to say.
Trucks that are actually available, trucks that help you maximize your profits by having the right work vehicle. Now, time is money. The perfect work vehicle doesn't break down, has all the space to carry what you need. That's what Work Trucks is intent on offering, while other dealerships just can't do it. Contracting is about time. Work Trucks saves you time with less back and forth trips and trucks that pass the highest standards to be put to work. Process is quick and easy when choosing a vehicle for work trucks, cargo vans, utility body trucks, and the Napod work bodies installed, pickup trucks of all sizes, and anything special like cranes or dump trucks. Work Truck supplies vehicles to people just like you and get you back on the road tomorrow. No dealership runaround. If you're a contractor, you need to know Work Trucks. That's a fact. Service industry, Work Trucks. They have the absolute trucks your business has to have. You need Work Trucks. Clinton Highway in Knoxville, downtown Birmingham for the entire inventory. Go right there, worktrucksllc.com. They'll find the perfect truck, outfit it, and make sure it fits your needs to a T. Proud supporters of the Tennessee Vols. Work Trucks with an X, LLC.com. So, John, Caleb got mad at me there, but my point is, in 2019, LSU was just loaded. In 2022, was Tennessee just loaded? Or did they have a great coach? Because we know in 2019, LSU didn't have a great head coach.
Well, no, Coach O. I think Coach O popped in your head because you were doing that truck commercial. Remember, Ed?
Oh, the Hummer! You want a Hummer? Everybody wants a Hummer. Get a Hummer.
JoJo?
Tell them about it, JoJo. That's my one default impression that I can always do. Like sometimes I can do a Christopher Walken and I struggle, but I can always do. I can go into that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, you probably should do Brent Musburger and Coach O doing a game together in the broadcast booth with McCarron and his girlfriend and
I've already gotten called creepy Uncle Dave because I said if I based my recruitment off of the ladies that were on campus, it would be Georgia.
Okay, that is creepy. Yeah,
I'm saying if I was 18, not now.
Oh, okay. That's an exaggeration, but I understand why with the truck commercial, I can see why that all formulated in your head. that's one of the most talented teams I've ever seen in college football. That and the 2020 Alabama team that came along right after that. Tennessee doesn't have that kind of talent. Certainly nowhere near that kind of talent. But I do wonder about that. When I go back and I think about Cedric Tillman, I think about Jalen Hyatt and those guys making plays, and I'm crediting the system. And maybe it had more to do with their ability. And Tennessee doesn't have that caliber of receiver anymore.
I thought Jalen Hyatt won the Biletnikoff Award because of the offense, not the other way around.
I did too.
Okay. All right. Here we go, Caleb. We're going to move on because, John, I want to get your topics, your thoughts on this. And that is, okay, I got it now. Is Nico Iamaleava too sensitive? Is that an issue? And he seems to take losses incredibly hard, and you should. But also, did we oversell his talent? Now, the production hasn't been there. I got questions about the deep ball. But in general, what do you think about Nico and where he is right now in mid-November as opposed to where you thought he would be?
Well, no, this wasn't the quarterback I expected to see. And I probably touted Nico as much as anybody did. I know you guys did too, Caleb in particular. I thought he should have been playing last year. I really did. And I still think he's tremendously talented. One thing I'm starting to wonder about, though, I thought going into this season, after watching that Citrus Bowl against Iowa, I thought Nico was the perfect fit for this offensive system. Now I'm not so sure. From what I've seen, I wonder if he might be better in another system. He's got a tremendous arm. We always talked about Joe Milton's arm and how, he could kill a receiver hitting him in the head with a pass, and how far he could throw it, as if that really comes into play in a football game.
He's a throw punter.
Yeah, take up the javelin, and you'll be judged on your distance, but not with a football. But he's got a really strong arm, and he can throw those deep outs that a lot of guys can't throw. I mean, a lot of guys. He can make throws some guys in the NFL can't make. But I'm not seeing this guy with the RPOs. I'm not seeing the running instincts that came to mind when I'm watching him against Iowa. I haven't seen that this season. I still think he's really talented, and maybe it's just not having experience yet, and other elements of the offense factor into this appraisal. But he's not making. He doesn't seem to be as good a fit in this offense as I thought he would be.
Okay, I want to put that as our poll question. Has Nico lived up to your expectations? And we'll get that out there right now. By the way, our last poll question, does Tennessee have an OC problem? Yes, Halsey was a soft hire. 82% of the vote. I know it was Heupel's offense. It's Heupel's offense. 17% of the vote. Caleb, go.
Yeah, and so it's funny you say that, John, because the first red flag, I thought about it too. I thought Nico was the perfect fit. I literally said he was created in a lab for this offense, the way Tim Tebow was for Urban Meyer's offense. And watching the Polynesian Bowl convinced me of that, funny enough, when he was still in high school. I guess we should have thought about the fact, though, that maybe the fact that Josh Heupel wanted him so bad is why we knew he wasn't a fit, because this is the same Josh Heupel who thought Joe Milton was a fit for his offense. So
That is
nice twist there.
I know we wouldn't even, but let's be. Caleb brings up a good point. We wouldn't know who Hendon Hooker was if Josh Heupel had his way.
No, you're right. He went out of his way to find Joe Milton and bring him to Tennessee. He saw Hendon Hooker and said, no, I got to have something better. And he decided Joe Milton was something better. And we all know better now. again, though, when I look at
that is just for the record, that's perhaps the most troubling thing for Tennessee football that Caleb's ever said on this program, John. If he went out and spent $2 million on the wrong quarterback, holy cow.
Well,
I mean, even Peyton Manning wants to weigh in on that for a second. He wants to say,
like, that is total bullshit.
Well, I remember
you might as well just fold up tent.
Well, I mean, we had Nick Saban in our corner. Nick Saban said it might have been the first weekend of the college football season on game day, or I don't remember the context, but Nick Saban said he was the perfect guy for this offense, that Nico was. Remember that first weekend, and Urban Meyer was raving about Nico Iamaleava. He called his colleagues with Fox and said, you got to watch this guy. Knowing that the competition wasn't there, it was against Chattanooga, but he was so enthralled with what Nico could do. So I'm not just talking about journalists, sports writers, talk show hosts saying how good Nico was and how he fit this offense. Other people were saying this. It wasn't, and it wasn't just the local folks. Everybody kind of had that idea. And I think a lot of it emanated from the Iowa game, his first start, how good he looked in that game and how instinctive he seemed to be.
Caleb, I think his deep ball is a problem. And it even, there was one pass, and I can't remember the game. You might help me here, but I said he should have kept it in bounds and gave Chris Brazel a chance to jump for it. I just think that's the biggest issue and I've tried to say it could be receivers, it could be timing, but I think ultimately his deep ball is not nearly as good as I thought it would be, and not even in the ballpark of what Hendon Hooker had.
I think the talent's there. I think we have to point this out. What you asked the question of, I think Nico Iamaleava may not be that mentally tough. We're talking about a guy who, I don't put a lot of stock into this because Josh Dobbs blocked me on Twitter, but Nico Iamaleava has blocked Dave. And so I on principle, just as a reporter and as a personality, I don't block anybody. Say whatever you want to me, because I feel like you should be thick-skinned enough to handle it, whatever it said. I mean, if you want to mute, fine, but I don't believe in blocking. I think that's soft, honestly. And so I think that is kind of indicative of, there was that. We saw Nico Iamaleava get so scared on a game-winning drive at Arkansas, he fumbled a snap that messed up a play. I've never seen that before. I've never seen a quarter. I mean, literally the phrase "palms are sweaty." Nico had such sweaty palms, he couldn't handle a snap. And so at what point do we say he's just mentally weak? At what point do we say he's Chris Webber at Michigan in the Final Four with the Fab Five?
We have breaking
Chris Webber got paid a lot of money too to play at college ball.
He did, and then he called a timeout and got a technical and cost his team a national title with all that money.
Yeah. We have breaking news, by the way. I just checked. I'm no longer blocked by Nico Iamaleava, so he's unblocked me.
Maybe he's deciding he needs to be a little more mentally tough.
That's what it is.
I have a hard time judging somebody as being mentally tough or mentally soft. I can't get inside a guy's head. I just think from how Nico, nobody was bringing up these things when everything was going well. And your mental toughness certainly isn't checked when you're outscoring opponents 191-13 in the first 3 games. So that never came up. And the Iowa game in the Citrus Bowl, though it was a tough defense, it wasn't a close game. It was a 35-0 game. Tennessee pretty much handled Iowa and its limited offense. So, but I have a hard time judging him on that, just on that. You may be right, but I just think it looks like he wasn't. I think the coaches thought he could do more than he could. Maybe the coaches were guilty somewhat, like we in the media and fans were, of thinking, this guy's Superman. We can throw everything we got at this guy. He can handle it, whatever he needs to do. He's that talented. And they're paying him that kind of money through NIL. So maybe their opinion was elevated. Because I go back to preseason comments, go back to even last year when Nico wasn't playing, and a lot of people were wondering why. And there was always, they would always make the point, boy, he's got total control of this offense. And everything I heard about him from people who watched him in practice and saw him, like, this guy's a real deal. I didn't hear anything negative about, well, I don't know if this guy is as good as everybody think, or is he worth the NIL deal? But none of that. Everything that came out about him was, this guy is something. Wait till you see this guy. And then that's kind of what we got in the first 3 games. So I always try to readjust. Unlike Tim Banks in that Georgia game, I always try to change my opinion based on what's happening. I don't get an idea and then stay an opinion and stay married to it. If this guy turns out, well, he's not as good as I thought, and maybe he isn't as good as I thought, but I still think he's really good and really talented. I just think there are other factors, but leave the door open. Maybe time will prove that your assessment's right about mental toughness or whatever, or the deep ball.
Couple of comments from the message board. What does Dave or Caleb know about mental toughness? Hey! And then we have another comment. It's Dave's fault. Nico was all he could talk about a year ago. Just saying. It's not my fault, but that is how I felt at the time. I'm allowed to change my opinions. I learned that from a very educated John Adams.
And if the implication is by saying that, because John, I'm going to tell you, I've heard people say this on some of those ESPN shows sometimes. Well, they'll say they will criticize coaches or media members for a quarterback struggling, and they're like, you propped him up too much and you put too much pressure on him. I'm sorry. If a quarterback is bad because I put too much pressure on him, that quarterback is not a good quarterback. Okay.
You're right.
Yeah.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
I kind of find it troubling. I was just checking for a joke that I'm unblocked. I mean, is he really keeping track of all the media that covers Tennessee, or is somebody in a social media camp? He may have that with the amount of money he's making. I don't know. We'll move on. Coming up next. Why in the world was Tennessee's defense dragging at the end of the game? For the love of goodness, I thought Jackson Moy needed like an ambulance to come on the field and get him off the field at one point. But Tennessee just didn't have the despite being 38 players deep on the defensive line, is what I've been told. So we'll discuss that. Also, Football IQ, our last look, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Stay tuned. Why was Tennessee's defense dragging at the end of the Georgia game with Caleb Calhoun? John Adams joins us, brought to you by Neubert Collision Center. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
24 F-150 4x4 Super Crew, $46,997. 24 Ford Transit 250 cargo van, $50,950. 24 Ford Maverick XLT Hybrid, $28,929. Local you trust, power you can afford.
Having been in the jewelry industry for a long time in the Knoxville community, I saw a need for a jeweler, a real jeweler.
Our ability to do these designs has really been based on the customers bringing new things in and challenging us as a store. Our goal is not to tell anybody what they want. Our goal is to listen to what they want and then help them get there.
Schedule your consultation today to get your special someone the perfect custom gift just in time for the holidays.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
There's repair.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical, now in Powell.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
You're listening to The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
The internet is full of pictures of each and every one of you.
Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free.
Is there nothing you people can't do?
Also available on OffTheHookSports.com.
John Adams on a Tuesday, brought to you by Neubert Collision Center Football IQ. That's the segment in which Caleb Calhoun and John Adams have way too much fun making fun of college coaches who are maybe not at their smartest on a Saturday. I'm going to ask both of you guys, what percentage of college football coaches would you meet and you would say to yourself, I think he's intelligent?
Head coaches?
John? Yeah. I don't even like the look on John's face.
Let me get back to you on that one.
I think can I say this much?
Yes.
We talked about adjusting and people figuring out Heupel's offense. I do think there's clear as day evidence that coaches now are, by and large, on average, smarter than they were 30 years ago, even though that's not much of a standard. And my evidence for that is that, John, one of the triggering things for me when people talk about Steve Spurrier all the time is they're like, he came in this fun and gun offense and it was so innovative and no one could figure it out. I'm like, all he did was put an extra receiver out there. And you're telling me it took defensive coordinator 7 years to be like, oh, well, maybe we should put another fast guy out there to stop it.
John, are you telling me that Jackie Sherrill wasn't a smart man?
No, I apologize if I'm repeating myself here, but I still remember very vividly covering a Super Bowl in Los Angeles, and the Cowboys were staying in Santa Monica, and I was visiting with Larry Lacewell, the former Tennessee defensive coordinator, really good defensive coach, really witty guy. Talked a long time, and one of the things remember Jimmy Johnson. He worked with I think he's from the same town in Arkansas that Bear Bryant was from, but knew Bear Bryant. Of course, worked with Jimmy Johnson when Jimmy was presiding over the Cowboys dynasty, so we're talking about coaches. He said, "Let me tell you something." He said, "Bear Bryant, Jimmy Johnson, Steve Spurrier, really, really smart coaches. Rest of them, just a bunch of dumbasses."
That's a great story.
You've never told me that.
Gold.
I thought I told you that.
No, you've never told me that. That's gold. Now I'll go back to Jackie Sherrill, and I always ask this like softball question to get things started. And he was wearing. Do you remember when he was wearing those snakeskin cowboy boots at SEC Media Days one year? And I said, "What about those boots?" And he said, "Blah blah blah blah. Yeah, I got these. Blah blah blah." And I said, "You've got I think the guy's name was Dwayne Madden, the quarterback. I can't even remember his name, but anyway." He looked just like Chris Rock. He looked like a bigger version of Chris Rock. And I said, "You've got a pretty good team this year, blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "Let me take it back to my boots." It's like you've got a chance to promote your program, and you're redirecting me back to your boots.
By the way,
I remember that quarterback. I thought his last name was Tate, but maybe.
There was a Wayne Matkin. Is that who you're
Wayne Matkin? That's who it
Wayne
was.
Matkin, yeah. Good call, Caleb.
Because I remember I interviewed him, and he said, I said, it feels like you're really close to being good, but you just keep making a mistake or two. And he goes, you've watched my game pretty close.
I had a very close friend who lived across the street with me, and their family were all Mississippi State fans during that era. So I knew a lot of the players better than I normally would have.
The question was kind of, you're a big screw up. He goes, you've been watching me. Why in the world is Tennessee's defense dragging at the end, John? Jackson Moy couldn't get off the field. And is that more of a coaching thing that Tennessee didn't bring pressure, or do we get oversold on they go 12 deep? Because I'm just here to tell you that most teams don't really go 12 deep anywhere. They all say that and they all want to. But at the end of the day, they go 12 deep against Kent State. They don't go 12 deep against the University of Georgia.
Tennessee did go 12 deep on the defensive front against Oklahoma.
Okay. That's fair.
It did. So, I mean, we've been hearing that, and you could Adam Sparks, who covers the Tennessee football beat for us at the News Sentinel, Adam broke it down, all the snaps. I mean, these guys weren't – and this was post-Oklahoma. So it wasn't just for those runaway games. I was mystified by that. I mean, it was like they needed to call an Uber to get them to, hey, need an Uber driver to get me off the field, just from the field to the sidelines. Be a short trip. Georgia gets the ball with 8:38 to go. Still, the game's still within reach. Pinned them down inside their 10-yard line. Make a stop. Get the ball back at midfield. The game's right there for you still, with all that's gone wrong. And Georgia proceeds to drive the length of the field, down after down, play after play. And you're right. Tennessee looked exhausted. How could it be exhausted? For one thing, it was never getting near the quarterback. So it wasn't as though there was this awesome rush at wearing these big guys out. And it's not like Carson Beck was scrambling around back there, three steps and throw pretty much. That was it. So why in the world were they so tired? It wasn't humid and hot out there, I don't think. It was – I couldn't understand it. I mean, it just looked done. And that was with the game on the line, the college football playoff berth on the line. I mean, the adrenaline should have been pumping. It wasn't. That was one of the strangest elements of that game, is how Georgia just took the ball and drove down the field and ate up the clock and then tacked on another score. And then you have a 2-touchdown game. I don't know how to explain that. Maybe they didn't substitute as much as they did in other games. Maybe these guys weren't conditioned to play more snaps. I don't know.
Caleb, that might speak to your point of talent. Have we over? I go back to what John says. They did play a lot of guys against Oklahoma, but clearly there's a reason somebody's on the first string and somebody's on the second string. The second string and third string guys aren't as good. Caleb, brought to you by Quality Tire Pros, serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service automotive, brakes, alignments, oil changes, and more. Go to qualitytirepros.com. Caleb.
Well, guys, if we're and I don't know if we're counting Leos and edge rushers, but if we are, I mean, Tennessee still had 11 defensive linemen play at least 19 snaps against Georgia over the weekend. So they still went pretty deep. I'm with John. I can't explain it either. I've only got maybe one plausible theory, maybe two. I don't know. One, there is the obvious, cliche story that you hear with teams sometimes. Did the defensive line go out the night before? Athens is a nice town. Did a bunch of them decide to go out and throw down a few and they weren't fully, there for that? I mean, like Donovan McNabb getting hung over.
Surely not. Surely Mike Griffith and I haven't been in a place in Dallas where a group of defensive linemen did that before.
Y'all do know that Donovan McNabb got wasted the night before the Super Bowl and was hung over in the Super Bowl.
I don't think they got.
Yeah, but he was trying to settle his nerves.
Oh, okay. That's and that's why T.O. I think many people sided with T.O. against Donovan McNabb is because T.O. came back on a broken leg. That's a different story. But anyways, could they have gone out and had a few brewskis? That's one possibility. The other is, I mean, and this is a big one. We talk about this all the time, guys. Tennessee practices in the morning. Dave, you bring this up. They practice early in the morning. It's not like do we think the grind of the season combined with practicing in the morning finally caught up with them in just another night game in November?
Well, you asked kind of two questions. John, I will say this. As soon as the season's over, Tennessee is an afternoon practice team because we have seen by ESPN and ABC that the Peach game is going to be in the evening. So if you want to be in that Peach game, then you need to practice in the afternoon. That morning stuff's done. It's time for all those reporters to get back to real work. I mean, it's time for some 12-hour days. These guys working 9 to 5 jobs over there. They need a dose of reality.
I think you guys are trying really, really hard to explain it, but it's still inexplicable to me how that happened. Because I go back to the Oklahoma game when Tennessee played a lot of players and I mean, Tennessee was bringing in guys. I had to check the numbers. I maybe know the numbers of the first two front fours, but not the third one. I was checking who is this guy? What number is that? And I mean, Tennessee's defense looked ferocious. I know Oklahoma had all kinds of offensive limitations, but just the energy with which those guys played. And that kind of brings up another point to me. James Pierce is supposed to be a high draft choice, very high.
Mm-hmm.
But you would think in a game like this, and I know that he gets maybe more attention than anybody else on the defensive front. But I think back to other really good pass rushers Tennessee's had, Derek, not just Tennessee, but in the SEC. Derek Barnett, certainly at Tennessee. David Pollock at Georgia. I mean, Pollock would always be at his best against the best teams. I mean, to me, this was a kind of game where you think maybe James Pierce will make a play. You know, we talk about that with the quarterbacks in big games. Like this is where he makes the decisive play. This is where he comes through. Didn't see that from James Pierce. Didn't see much at all from him.
Sorry, just one more explanation before we go. I would say that maybe it's also possible, as Dave brought up aptly, that they ran a lot of 12 personnel and extra blocker zone. And look, guys, if you can look at the PFF grades, the weak link for Tennessee in this game was the linebackers that were always out of position. Jeremiah Thielander is the feature middle linebacker and had just one tackle in the game. I think that put even more pressure on the defensive line, and constantly fighting against 12 personnel maybe just wore them down in the end without any help from the linebackers.
John, I think that's more likely than Caleb's early assertion that the entire team was on crystal meth.
Are you kidding? They play so energetic if they were on crystal meth. That wouldn't be the one.
Yeah, they'd still be playing. They'd hitting blocking dummies in Athens.
Yeah, I had a high school buddy who played college football, and he said that there was a run of cocaine that went through the locker room. And I said, so how did it affect your play? Because I was stunned that they did it during games. And he said, we were great in the first quarter and great in the third quarter, but we were awful in the second and fourth quarter.
I mean, during the Civil War, heroin was a medical breakthrough at the time. It helped men and their soldiers be more willing to fight and fight through some pain.
So are you guys saying that, I mean, the team should be on drugs, the defense needs to be on drugs? Is that what you're saying?
No, I won't say this, though. I remember a coach told me one time, I'm not going to say who it was. I'm going to say, well, I mean, you say that you suspend them because of the drug test. And I said, but that's a school thing. He goes, damn it, Dave. He goes, who do you think gives them the drug tests? In other words, I control who passes and who fails. And I had a player tell me, I passed 42 drug tests or failed 42 drug tests, but I still played because I was good. And my teammate got thrown out, or my roommate got thrown off the team because he was no good after failing one. He was a very good running back at the time. I'm not going to give away who that was. That's kind of the way things go with drugs. All right, football IQ. I don't think they were drunk the night before, just for the record.
John Adams never got backlash from a coach for writing an article saying the coach gets preferential treatment over who he kicks off the team and who he doesn't. Yeah, I remember that column, John.
Very good stuff. All right, let's get to football IQ right now. This is John and Caleb's favorite moment of the week overall, not just in work, as they get to hear one of two sounders, and that is
That's crazy.
Or for the total morons,
You suck.
Caleb, go for it. Football IQ. It's Last Look, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hall. What do you got?
All right, so the first one, did y'all see that Pitt-Clemson game over the weekend where Clemson and Cade Klubnik managed to run 50 yards for a game-winning touchdown with like 20 seconds left?
I did see Klubnik's touchdown run, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't see much of the game overall, no.
I'm actually not going to blame Narduzzi for that play because, I don't blame you for blitzing right there. You got to trust your safeties to not take the worst angle in the history of mankind when a quarterback takes off. But I do blame him for earlier in the game, Pitt got down to the 1 yard line, and on 1st and goal from the 1, Narduzzi called a draw from shotgun, a pass play, and then on 3rd down, he decided, let me send somebody in motion to set up another draw play, which resulted in a false start, 5-yard penalty. They kicked the field goal. I'm doing another part of my football IQ now, guys. I'm sick of coaches getting in shotgun when there's less than a yard to go for a first down or a touchdown.
That's really stupid, isn't it? Or is it beyond stupid, Dave?
You suck.
I thought it might be. Yeah.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, I'm sick of it. It's driving me crazy. So that's my first one. The next one is another getting in shotgun. We all watched the LSU Florida game over the weekend, didn't we?
Yes.
And it was a 2-score loss. That loss happened on the first drive. Florida has the worst rush defense, or one of the top worst 3 rush defenses in the SEC. It is 4th and less than a yard to go past midfield. I don't blame Brian Kelly for going for it. He calls a Ford shovel pass on a reverse play to try to get the first down rather than just run it up the middle against Florida. That set the tone for the whole game.
That was what, Dave?
You suck.
Yeah, he did, and that's what a lot of LSU fans were saying.
Wait, did we all have him mislabeled? Because our poll question that's up now is how many coaches are smart? All, none, 10%, 90%, 10% running away with it right now. And John, do we have Brian Kelly's intelligence overrated?
He's got a great record. He's won wherever he's been. That's what you always say when you. Yeah, he's not doing a great job at LSU. Now, I will say the defensive personnel that LSU has is nothing comparable to what the legendary Coach O and JoJo had back in the day when they had that. JoJo. Yeah, I thought I was cueing you on that one. He looks like he's lost the team. He really does. And I really question going into that game. A friend was telling me he had the LSU Florida game as in a 3-team parlay. And he was betting on LSU, given, I think it was 4 points. I said, I think I'd replace that one because I was really uncertain if LSU had just pretty much folded up its tent after that Alabama game.
Parlays are for gambling degenerates and suckers. Speaking of, Caleb, who you got next?
For the record, by the way, Coach O had an undefeated season at LSU and Nick Saban never did. Okay, I'm joking.
No, you're right, though.
Yeah.
True.
So moving on, Eli Drinkwitz in Missouri, they had a chance to make a case to be in the college football playoff race as a 2-loss team. But late in the game, trailing South Carolina 21-12 on a 4th and less than a yard to go in the red zone, Eli Drinkwitz settled for a field goal. That cost the game. I think in those situations, you have to go for it. Even though they got the field goal to cut it to 21-15, you got to go for the first down and try to score there.
That's crazy. I don't have as much of a problem with that one, John, just because you cut it to one score.
How much time was left in the game?
It was midway through the fourth quarter.
Yeah. I'd have probably gone for it there.
I think you go for it.
Yeah, I don't hate it, though. I don't hate it. It's not to the jackass standpoint.
Okay, well then, so what would be the proper response to that? You don't want to say you suck.
No,
if you
you
just
say,
don't really.
You say, that's crazy. There you go.
All right.
Or we could always go with the fallbacks, Peyton.
They're like, that is total bullshit.
I still call him Elia.
I did that for a longest time because that's what he was called at Appalachian State. And
he said earlier in his Missouri tenure, he said, "Well, my friends call me Eli."
Yeah, his friends call him.
I'm not his buddy, so it's Elia.
Yeah, his friends call him Moron. That's what his friends call him. Oh my gosh. Call him the local village idiot is what they call him. All right, Caleb, who's next? Last look brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hunt.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
All right, Caleb, what do you got?
All right, so a couple more, and this is timeout misusage, and y'all know I hate that. But BYU lost to Kansas over the weekend in a bad upset that really puts their playoff hopes in jeopardy because they now have to win the Big 12. The reason they lost was because they couldn't stop the clock on the final drive. The reason they couldn't stop the clock after they got stopped was because Kalani Sitake, at the beginning of the third quarter, BYU's driving. They bring up a 4th and 3. Kalani Sitake brings out his team to go for it on 4th down, runs the play clock all the way down and decides, you know what, timeout. Let me burn a timeout. I've changed my mind. I want to kick a field goal. You can't do that in that situation. You gotta go all in on your decision, but you can't burn a timeout.
You suck, you jackass.
Story, Jay, if I may, John, about Kalani Sitake. He was speaking to some, I think it was like a Mormon deal in Chattanooga. So we actually had him in studio at one point. I can tell you firsthand, there's not a lot going on up there.
I think Caleb would concur. I think you'd also need to record Caleb saying, "You can't do that." That needs to be one of our options on this test.
Okay, I could just cue him up like with a little buzzer.
You can't do that.
You can't. All right, Caleb, we got another one.
Oh yeah, we got another one. We got another brilliant brain to bring up here, but it's a guy named Matt Rule at Nebraska, who I still think is doing a decent job building a program off the field. He's like Brent Pry, does a good job off the field, but when it comes to like using his noggin on the field, just not there.
I don't like a guy that adds letters to his name. Just to put a damn H in there. I mean, what's that about, John?
Well, you got to check his family history on that one. We could do a whole show on why do you spell your name that way?
Well,
how about John Aadams?
Well, Nebraska was facing Nebraska over the weekend was facing USC, and they were trailing 28-20. And Nebraska had a 4th and 3 from their own 40. It's midway through the fourth quarter. I get it. I'm not a fan of punting it there, but I get it. Own 40-yard line, 1-score game. If you want to punt it, fine. Matt Rule burned a timeout and then took a delay of game to punt it. And it was 21-20 at that point. It was 21-20. Matt Rule burned a timeout, took a delay of game to punt it. USC got the ball, marched down the field to score to go up 28-20. You don't burn timeouts there. You either, if you want to punt it, which I'm not for, fine, just make the decision to punt it. But if you're going to go for it, you got to go all in. In the fourth quarter, you can't burn timeouts to punt it or kick a field goal or to take a delay of game to punt it.
John, I'll bring this
closer. You can't do that.
No, you can't do that, John. I'll bring this closer to home. Josh Heupel turns to his analyst all the time, and he's got that big portfolio of numbers. It's not that hard. I mean, if you're down 2 touchdowns and there's 2 minutes and 40 seconds left, take a timeout there. Don't wait and take it under 2 minutes because you never know what can happen. You're taking away more game by doing that.
You can't do that.
You can't. He's John Adams.
You know what you can do, John? Never forget the genius of Butch Jones. My greatest go-to on special teams timeouts is calling a timeout because you don't have your field goal block team out. And then Florida goes for it and gets the first down. And like Florida's kicking a 50-yard field goal. Who cares if you don't have your field goal block team out? Save the timeout.
No, throw back to the butcher.
You suck, you jackass.
John, great stuff as always. Brought to you by Neubert Collision Center. Have a great rest of the week. Does Tennessee make the college football playoff? Yes or no? And if not, is the season a disappointment?
Yes, it makes college football playoff.
Okay.
So the
Good
season
stuff.
isn't a disappointment.
John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel. Thank you, sir. I want to remind everyone that we're brought to you in part by our friends at Asia Cafe. I ate there over the weekend, and Asia Cafe is absolutely tremendous. They have several locations around town. You can go to asiacafe.org to learn more. As a matter of fact, they have 5 locations to choose from. And they have the fantastic Brazilian Cocoa Energy Booster Premix Instant White Coffee that you can order online at asiacafe.org. Also, I want to thank our fantastic friends at the UPS store Hardin Valley. The UPS store Hardin Valley is where you need to go for not only your shipping needs and those sorts of things, but you also want to take advantage of all the promotional items they're able to offer. So we certainly appreciate them. They're owned by Vol fans, so know that when it comes to the UPS store Hardin Valley, they help individuals and small businesses, wide range of products and services, locally owned and operated. Link right down below. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports, the show represented by Banks & Jones, banksandjones.com. Other attorneys say they'll settle, or say they'll go to trial. They won't. They'll settle and settle for less. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. Off the Hook.